In just 48 hours, the U.S. economy suffered a catastrophic blow. $6.4 trillion in market value wiped out, according to CNBC. That's more than the United Kingdom's annual GDP, gone. The Dow fell more than 1,800 points, while the S&P 500 posted its worst two-day percentage drop since March 2020, Bloomberg reported. And the cause? Not war, not a pandemic, not a natural disaster, but a single, politically motivated tariff announcement delivered without warning, without policy support, without a shred of foresight into the market. Mohamed El-Erian, chief economic advisor at Allianz, warned on Fox Business that shocks like this, if repeated, would damage the reputation of the United States and investor confidence. Paul Krugman, writing in the New York Times, labeled the move economic suicide, arguing that it could cause a collapse in consumer confidence and lead to job losses within months. While millions of Americans saw their 401ks and pensions shrink, President Trump continued to downplay the damage, tweeting reassuringly from a golf course in Florida. The message couldn't be clearer. Wall Street is screaming, and Washington is silent. While the U.S. economy teetered on the brink, former President Donald Trump took to the golf course, issuing a tone-deaf message, "Only the weak lose," amid rising public outrage. According to CNBC, core inflation had surged, and household purchasing power was collapsing under the weight of escalating tariffs. Rather than addressing the crisis, Trump appeared at a LIV golf event bankrolled by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, a move that, as highlighted by the Washington Post, raised ethical concerns over foreign influence and presidential priorities. His absence from serious policy response, paired with performative bravado, is now drawing bipartisan criticism. Bloomberg analysts warn that the lack of economic leadership in moments of turmoil exacerbates investor panic and household distress. The economic impact of Trump's tariff escalation is now unmistakable. Apple, Tesla, Qualcomm, and Whirlpool, cornerstones of American industry, are reeling from a 34% export tax, as reported by Reuters and CNBC. These firms, deeply tied to global supply chains, particularly in China, have seen billions wiped from their market caps within days. But the damage isn't confined to boardrooms. According to the Wall Street Journal, small businesses are experiencing input cost shocks, while consumers face record-high prices on food, vehicles, and household goods. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a 12-month spike in core consumer prices not seen since the early 1980s. This double blow, corporate strain and household inflation, is eroding economic confidence. In Bloomberg's recent survey, over 60% of Americans say they are cutting back on spending just to meet essential needs. The message is clear: this isn't a market correction. It's a nationwide crisis with Main Street bearing the burden. As inflation rises and wages stagnate, a growing number of Americans are unable to cover even their most basic expenses, an alarming trend confirmed by the latest Federal Reserve data, which shows a sharp increase in household financial insecurity since the new tariffs were imposed. Adding weight to public concern, Warren Buffett, one of America's most respected investors and historically a Trump ally, has publicly denounced the administration's tax rhetoric. Speaking at a shareholder meeting quoted by CNBC, Buffett stated bluntly, "Tax cuts for the wealthy won't fix a policy crisis that's hurting working-class Americans." He warned these decisions may cripple long-term economic stability. The backlash has reached the streets. Reuters reported coordinated protests in Washington, D.C. and New York, with thousands marching under banners accusing Trump of economic sabotage. This wave of unrest underscores a deepening frustration, not just with market turbulence, but with policies seen as deliberately favoring the elite while abandoning the average American. Americans are no longer staying silent, not when their jobs, savings, and future are collapsing under political chaos. On social media, the backlash is explosive. Hashtags like "Huge Trump Eyes Destroying America" and "Resist Trump" are dominating Twitter and Facebook. The frustration stems from economic fallout that's both widespread and deeply personal. According to Reuters, the tariffs are creating market instability that has rattled investor confidence and placed households under unsustainable pressure. Even Trump's own voter base is beginning to fracture. Business leaders and economists alike warn that this isn't just a downturn, it's a crisis engineered by short-term political ego. And as the Wall Street Journal reports, confusion over the administration's inconsistent tariff policies is eroding U.S. credibility with key trade partners, especially as allies struggle to interpret erratic White House announcements. The verdict from the public is harsh and unified. The economy is bleeding and Washington is playing roulette with American livelihoods. A wave of frustration and betrayal is sweeping across the country. People are openly comparing this moment to the darkest chapters of U.S. economic history and asking a hard question. Can Trump truly be trusted to fix the economy he helped break? With the economy in free fall and millions of Americans struggling, skepticism over Trump's economic leadership is reaching critical mass. His tariff policies, initially pitched as a strategic maneuver against China, have morphed into a broad-based assault on global supply chains. As Bloomberg notes, these tariffs have not only failed to bring back U.S. manufacturing, they've driven up costs across the board, hurting both producers and consumers. And according to the Financial Times, the administration's erratic trade strategies have undermined investor confidence and destabilized America's global trade reputation, particularly with smaller nations caught in the economic crossfire, some of which Trump bizarrely referenced in recent statements. The bottom line, Trump's economic playbook is being questioned not just by critics, but by history itself. They've made life more expensive for every American family. And now voters are starting to wonder, can he even change course? Does he have what it takes to fix this before it's too late? The sense of urgency is intensifying. In just one trading day, over 700 points vanished from the Dow Jones, sending shockwaves through Wall Street and Main Street alike. According to CNBC on March 5, 2024, the Dow Jones Index lost 713 points due to negative reactions from investors about the Trump administration's lack of direction in tax and trade policies. Bloomberg also warned that the lack of policy stability from the White House is becoming a systemic risk for the market. The administration appears increasingly unprepared. No concrete plans, no cohesive messaging, just chaos. For millions of Americans, the damage is no longer theoretical. It's at the grocery store. It's in their utility bills. It's in the sinking value of their retirement accounts. And now, the fear is no longer if there will be a recession, but when and how severe. The press conference intended to reassure the American public turned into a disaster broadcast before a global audience. The market earthquake on March 14th, newly released financial reports revealed troubling signs. Inflation remained high, consumer confidence had dropped, and all major indicators were in freefall. The Dow Jones fell over 720 points, the S&P lost more than 113, and the Nasdaq plunged nearly 500 points, the steepest decline in months. Instead of instilling confidence, the press conference became a symbol of dysfunction. Trump's off-topic remarks and absence of a concrete recovery plan only deepened public anxiety. The timing could not have been worse. March 14th, the day those reports were released, marked a turning point. According to Bloomberg and Reuters on March 14, 2024, the latest report from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA, showed that consumer confidence fell by 11%, while core inflation remained at 5.7%. Trump's press conference that day was considered a media disaster by many news agencies, causing the market to immediately react negatively. Wall Street didn't just react to numbers, it reacted to leadership. When a president dodges hard truths in favor of political distractions, investors lose confidence. That day, nearly $1.5 trillion in market value was wiped out in a matter of hours. This wasn't just a bad day for the market. It was a referendum on the White House's credibility, and it failed. About the administration's response to economic instability, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt began with familiar rhetoric. And shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals. This is a vicious gang. But then a reporter asked a surprising question. Would the president use something to potentially run for a third term? As he said, there are amendments there. Look, you guys continue to ask the president this question about a third term, and then he answers honestly and candidly. Instead of addressing surging inflation, falling markets, and economic anxiety, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt doubled down on deflection, blaming the press and attacking critics. But the real shock came not from her rhetoric, but from the president's own ongoing flirtation with a third term, a move many view as constitutionally dangerous and politically destabilizing. According to Reuters on March 15, 2024, the White House press conference turned into a media crisis when Caroline Leavitt, press secretary, avoided all questions related to economic policy, instead attacking the media. When asked whether President Trump intended to run for a third term, she did not deny it, even hinting that the possibility could happen due to the amendments allowed. According to analysis from the Financial Times, Trump's continued hints about a third term in the context of economic instability could undermine confidence in American democratic institutions, while making financial markets more unstable due to concerns that policy will continue to be personalized and lack direction. This pivot from economic accountability to authoritarian undertones is alarming. The White House appears more invested in managing optics than managing inflation, and the American public is noticing. The president's casual deflection, delivered with a smile, may seem benign, but in the context of rising authoritarian rhetoric, it landed like a political grenade. Rather than clearly rejecting the idea of a third term, something explicitly forbidden by the 22nd Amendment, he left the door open with ambiguous language. This moment has become symbolic of a broader crisis, the erosion of democratic norms under the guise of populist approval. In a time of economic freefall and institutional strain, the lack of a firm constitutional affirmation is not only inappropriate, it is incendiary. According to CNN Politics Analysis, March 16, 2024, on the flight the night before the press conference, Mr. Trump was asked about the possibility of running for a third term. In denial, he simply replied that it's not really something we're thinking about. Jeffrey Toobin, a constitutional law expert, commented on CNN. Such evasion, especially in a context of economic and social instability, is a test of the limits of power that the Constitution does not allow. It is noteworthy that in the clear speech, no one in the White House explicitly stated that he would not run for a third term. This creates a dangerous currency when ambiguity is used as a tool to test public opinion, eroding each layer of possible regime boundaries. In a stunning moment of institutional ambiguity, the White House left the door ajar on the possibility of a third term, a move that sent political shockwaves across the country. This wasn't just a constitutional misstep. It was a warning flare. When those in power begin to downplay the legal limits of office, democracy itself becomes negotiable. What made this worse was the silence that followed. Instead of clarifying their stance, the administration dodged the press, creating an information vacuum that fueled more speculation. According to Reuters on March 16, 2024, the press conference not only failed to reassure the public, but also ignited a crisis of confidence. Journalist Steve Holland wrote, "The failure to explicitly reject the possibility of a third term is a dangerous step backward in the administration's messaging." CNN also quoted political historian Douglas Brinkley, warning, "The last time we saw an American president avoid the 22nd Amendment was..." Never. The question was no longer inflation, but is America slipping away from a constitutional republic? As the press continued to question, the atmosphere in the meeting became as tense as a string, a government on the line between accountability and authoritarianism. At the very moment when transparency was most needed, the White House sidestepped direct accountability again. Instead of addressing how a senior journalist's private contact information was leaked into a government-linked group chat,